I just noticed I do not have whiskey in my glass. That's horrible. We'll start with the lower proof. Welcome back, everyone. Let's see who we have in the chat. I see first time we actually have someone new. Well, welcome to the channel. I appreciate that. Thanks so much, Christian. Yeah, thank you so much, man. It's nice to have a new face, new name, Christian. Just pop in a bottle of whiskey real quick, Christian, as we get started. Wait for everyone else to kind of join. What are you sipping, Christian? What's in your glass today? I'd love to know what you're sipping on. I'm sipping one of the newer releases, I think, from J West from 1787 Provenance. This is their 14-year cask strength. I start with the only cask strength, so can't go back at this point. But what's in your glass? Who else do we have as well? See my man Terrence. Hey, Terrence, what's going on, buddy? Good to see you, my friend. Good to see you. Always a pleasure. Always fun. Mr. Richards, how are you? Good to see you as well. Thanks for joining. Appreciate you jumping in today to hang out with us. Always good to see a fellow, a good name. Let's see who else we have. And more important, what's in everyone's glass as well tonight? Stag 24D. All right, Terrence. Very nice. Stag, very nice. Danny Lynn. What's going on, Danny? Welcome, man. Good to see your name. I'll pour both of these actually while we're waiting. I'm going to start with the Provenance, though, and then move over to the Reveries Raven. I'll start that way. Who else do we have in the chat? Who else is here tonight? Patrick, what's going on, buddy? Are you back in Dallas, or are you still in the Berg? Hopefully, maybe you made it back safely, or you might still be there. Who knows? Who knows? But cheers to you, Patrick. Tell Wenzel I said hello as well. Tell I said hello. Can't wait to see you guys next week. I can't believe it's gonna be next week. We're gonna have some fun. Woo! Sipping some great whiskey. All right. I don't want to keep our special guest behind the scenes too long. He has a busy night, so we're going to try to keep this to an hour because Jay has an early morning tomorrow, and so do I as well. But first and foremost, thank you, everyone, for jumping on to the live stream tonight. As you guys know, I don't do a ton of live streams just with my work travel. I'm on the road almost every week, literally several days a week. So it's kind of hard to commit to a live stream. But whenever I can get to these, I love it. And then more important, honestly, whenever I have a chance to bring on someone who's like a special guest, someone who is like well known in the whiskey industry. I mean, everyone knows this man. When you think of like whiskey, you think of when I think of him, I think of a lot of different names. So Jay West is like a man of many different names. I think of him as Take Reviews. I think of Shared Pour. I think of Reveries, the Raven. I think of Provenance. I think of Bourbon Concierge. I think of pretty much everything when I think of Jay West. I think of just a good human being who has his hands in various different parts of the industry, whether if it's on the review side, whether if it's, bringing great spirits and whiskey for us all to enjoy. But he's honestly just a wonderful human being. So let's go ahead and bring on our special guest, the man, the myth, and truly the whiskey legend, Jay West.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, cheers, buddy. How are you?
Man, I'm doing well. I can't complain. How are you?
Good. Can't complain, man. Can't complain. Good to see you. And thanks for jumping in here. I know you are like super busy this time of year, so we appreciate you, Jay.
No, any opportunity is a pleasure. So I appreciate you having me.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. So Jay, I know, we were down there. I think it was just like 2 weeks ago, right? Right before the holiday. Did a fantastic barrel pick. Beautiful facility. And the first question I have for you, right? This is a good one because someone reached out to me and they said, they were like, Judge, did you say Jay West owns the Reveries, the Raven, and like Shared Pour? And I'm like, yeah, Jay kind of does like everything. So maybe that's the first question. Like, when we kind of sit back, when you think of Jay West, you do hear all those names. You hear Shared Pour, you hear Take Reviews, the Reveries, Provenance, Bourbon Concierge. So what is truly, what's your role, Jay, in all these various different entities, companies, and brands as a whole?
Certainly. And it's a great question, right? I'm wearing one tonight, but I'm certainly a man of many hats. But my role first and foremost is principal whiskey maker for the Reveries and for Provenance. So everything is really secondary to that.
Okay.
A partner and the whiskey maker. I oversee all of the liquid that comes out of Middleburg Barrel Company, which is another name that gets thrown around, right? That's the home, that's the name of the property where Provenance Estate and Provenance Bourbon and the Reveries all come out of. But I've been releasing my own single barrels for like 7 years now. And so
Okay.
I've also, been doing a lot of consulting on the retail side. And so I see a lot of barrels come to market that way through
Okay.
Shared Pour and the Bourbon Concierge, where, we run a lot of your barrels. You've been an
Yep.
incredible partner to the business. And I moved to DC really earlier this year to be closer to kind of everything that was going on. It was so hard to manage from afar, even though I also travel somewhat religiously. And so,
Yeah.
it's kind of the perfect combination of, I get to really make whiskey every day. And then on the side, I also kind of get to be involved in releasing some of it to market as it sees fit and as it fits with the business. But really, really, I'm thrilled to call, DC home, but I feels like I live in Middleburg more than I do DC some weeks.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So you have your hands in everything, but primarily the whiskey making and blending and the batches and so forth. That's like your true passion. That's like the core of what you're doing now, going forward, day in, day out.
That's correct. Yeah. And
That's awesome.
I've been a consultant for years, and I love to, I still will continue to travel the country and the world, like buying spirits and barrels
Yeah.
kind of by the cask. But, it all kind of centers around what I've been working towards, which is the launch of the Reveries and for Provenance for a couple of years now.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that, Jay. That's awesome. So Terrence brings up a good point, Jay, and I have a good question for you here. And thanks, Terrence. So Terrence said he needs to try the Reverie 17. So that's actually a really good point because I remember when this one first came out. So batch one, the Reverie's Raven, this thing was like solid gold, right? It was amazing. It's delicious. And then, of course, obviously, as Terrence wants to try the Reverie 17, what's like when you think of like your vision, Jay, for just the Reverie's like sub brand itself under Middleburg Barrel Company? What is your vision in terms of like, are you looking to put out like X number of batches per year? You also have private groups, which thank you, by the way, for letting our private group, the Bourbon Judge Group, come in and do a barrel pick. But what is your vision for the Reveries just specifically itself? Because that was the original one.
Yeah, it's sort of fascinating, right? Because both Provenance and the Reveries were supposed to launch simultaneously. And don't
Ah,
mind my hand; I chopped my finger while I was cutting today.
oh my gosh.
It's okay. All 10 of me is here. I
Oh,
do
there we
like that
go.
it's one of the better fingers to like have injured, but um, you know, Reveries and Provenance were supposed to launch simultaneously, and we ultimately
Ah,
went live with the Reveries first, because the
okay.
whiskey I wasn't exactly happy. I wasn't ready to release the whiskey that became Provenance quite yet. So, you know,
Got it.
by all metrics, that meant Reveries was first, and a lot of people view it as kind of the original brand. But the Reveries
Oh.
to me is the experimental, it's the wild stuff, it's the crazy stuff,
Mm,
it's everything that I've been acquiring over the last couple of years, whether it's been from across the globe or across the country,
okay.
and ultimately still very small lots of things, right? Where
Mhm.
Provenance is supposed to be a national brand. I've been acquiring whiskeys for Provenance that can support a national brand, that have the volumes that can go to a national brand, and the profiles that kind of fit with a national audience. And the Reveries is
Okay.
kind of the upside down version of that, or the affront to that, or the experimental kind of avant-garde, where you see these crazy things, right? Like that wild lot of 9 and 10-year-old Indiana that I launched the Reveries with, these 17-year
Yeah.
barrels that are, to take a great old quote, we're too weird to live, but like too rare to die, right? And so I had like, you know, it felt like a lot of them, but still really in the grand scheme of what it takes to power a national whiskey brand, too
Yeah.
small and not nearly enough to actually power something that needs to be coast to coast. And so Reveries is kind of where I get to test experiments and ideas. It's where I get to create things that maybe not have a home elsewhere. And it's also where I kind of get to just let an unbridled passion for making whiskey run free without rules or regulations. Well, while following the rules and regulations, there's no like,
Yeah.
oh, Raven got to be this huge, bold, rich whiskey that was powerful and different. And like, we blended a lot of really expensive whiskey that I got to do some crazy stuff that I couldn't do at a scale to fit a national.
Yeah.
But I could do and release 4 batches a year, to
Got it.
groups, like the internet group and your audience here and my audience and stuff
Sure.
that really devour them in what turns out to be really small quantities.
Got it. Okay, that's fair. All right. So it sounds like the Reveries is more of like the for like the very like in depth whiskey consumer who loves like everything very unique, and the Providence is more of like for the national scale across the entire U.S. Like what the traditional whiskey consumer is looking for.
Yeah, and
Oh,
I think it does Provenance a little bit disservice under that lens, but it is kind of an idea, right? Like the profiles of whiskeys I'm selecting for Provenance, super solid. They're meant to fit certain flavor profiles and like taste profiles and stuff. And like, I'm actually not super concerned if something is wild and weird, and that to me means like, okay, uh, that goes more in the reveries where there's an appetite where people are like, hey, what's the strangest thing you have? Like what's something that has a wild story, right? Like what is
Yeah.
a blend of 7 and 8 and 10 and 15 and 16-year-old whiskeys is just like kind of bonkers and stuff. So they actually, now that they're both released, it makes a lot of sense because they almost fit together perfectly. Like one is meant to serve a national audience and one is meant to
Hmm.
serve an audience like you and I are talking to tonight, right? Who are like
Yeah.
very in the weeds and very tip of
Sure.
the spear. And like I will block off my calendar at work so I can be online at 12:27 and 30 seconds after to hit that really rare limited drop because I have to have it. And so,
Okay.
this
Got
to
it.
me is the perfect opportunity to serve both of those audiences.
I love it. I love it. I love it. That's awesome. That is awesome, Jay. I appreciate it. Thanks for that perspective. And Tracy, by the way, cheers to you. You should have hung out with us 2 weeks ago, Tracy. You were invited. Come on, you could have came up from Atlanta. We'll have to do it the next time, Tracy. Don't worry. We're gonna
We'll have you
hopefully
back.
be, yeah, we'll have you
Welcome
back.
back anytime.
You come hang out with us for sure, definitely. So Jay, so we kind of going back to like I remember I used to watch a lot of your reviews years ago, and now with having your own whiskey that you're truly blending, because you did single barrels before, like you said, for about 7 years, which those single barrels, I mean, you're known in the industry because you have a really good palate, right? And
Thank
I
you.
think you're even better. You've been able to blend really well, which blending is, I mean, I would think is extremely difficult. How hard has it been from you from going from obviously of course you had Shared Pour, you had Take Reviews, you did your own single barrels, but how hard is it when you've actually started to create your own brands and like to be able to create like really good custom blends? Because I've tried blending at my house, I fail epic every single time. It's absolutely horrible, right? I'll take like a wild turkey and I'll blend it with like a Taylor or a different brand, and it's absolutely horrible. So how have you been able to do that, like to kind of go into the blending world?
Yeah, blending, a lot of people, I find there's no middle of the spectrum. A lot of people talk about blending like it's the easiest thing in the world, and a lot of people talk about blending like it's the hardest thing in the world. And I still actually think the blending is super difficult, right? Like I released the first batch of Raven, I think it was April or May. I've been working on that since February, while I had also been working on the next batch of Raven, which I just released like 2 weeks ago. And so,
Yeah.
sometimes the whiskey clicks and it works together, and it really only takes me 2 months to release a batch. But other times,
Okay.
like Raven Batch 4, it took me darn near 7 months to get it exactly where I wanted it. And also, a huge
Wow.
component of that is that you get in your own head too, right? You're like,
Yeah.
it's not quite perfect. And so I've actually learned I love being in DC now, right? Where I have whiskey friends
Yeah.
everywhere. And it's not to say that I didn't have that in Wisconsin, but in Wisconsin I was just always traveling. So I was never home. I never had an
Yeah.
opportunity to really hang with people. But I do dinners and events and go into the office and I meet different enthusiasts and groups. And so I love bringing 100 milliliters of something and being like, what do you think of this? And folks would be like,
Yeah.
oh man, that's really good. I'm like, okay, cool. Like I kind of thought it was there, but after you
Yeah.
blend and you're on like the 50 or 60th version of something, you get kind of wrapped up into it. And then the hardest thing to do is to just put it in the bottle and like let it go
Yeah.
out. And so
Yeah.
um, blending is really difficult. And one of the huge benefits of being a non-distilling producer is that you can acquire whiskey from tons of different distilleries, right? Like Jim
Hmm.
Beam is never going to be like, well, we love this Booker's blend, but you know what would make it better? 2% Heaven Hill. And I have
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
flexibility, but it also makes
So
it
true.
that much harder because the
Yeah.
profiles are different, the whiskeys are different, the ages and sources and prices and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I remind myself that like a hard day's worth still means I work in whiskey, and that's pretty okay with me. So I try and keep it all in perspective as well.
So true. So true. No, that's a good point. I mean, very well said. Very well said. Is it, I would assume now that you're blending your own, when you try other brands, maybe even like other blended brands, like from other NDPs and so forth, do you find yourself like sipping something and saying, this is really really good, but if I could have had like my I guess my own touch on it, I would have added a little bit more rye or maybe like something with like an older age like bourbon statement or something of that nature, like the nature rather is. Do you ever kind of find yourself kind of going down that path a little bit?
It is tempting, but what I really enjoy doing is I feel like there's a lot of my personality in the DNA of the whiskeys that I love in the blends
Yeah.
that I make. And so
Okay.
my approach is actually to try and figure out as much as I can about the person who made that whiskey, right? Whether I'm
Ooh.
drinking like K. Luke by Jonathan Maisano, or I'm drinking like a
Okay.
little book, right? That's Freddie No, the fourth or fifth, or yeah, I forget which generation he is.
Yeah.
You know, to me it's less about critiquing the specific whiskey, and it's like, what was this
Yeah.
person going for? Like what do they like, and you can tell when you start to think about, just kind of like when you go to a restaurant, right, and you have a chef's preparation of a dish that you know really well, and you're like,
Yeah.
it's different, but it's the same. But like their flair and their tendencies and their ingredients, and the stylistic choices,
Yeah.
all tell me so much about that person. And whether you learn something from that is kind of up to you. But to me, it's
Yeah.
really fascinating to figure out like what is driving the other prolific blenders of the industry today. And also sometimes I might be like, oh, interesting. Like this has a ton of citrus with these really toffee flavors. And to me,
Hmm.
I would have never done that. And now maybe I'm going to go back and be like, I actually have this bright, super weird cask in my inventory that I haven't been quite sure what to do with. And I'm going to pair it with these things. And so,
Yeah.
it's a little less qualitative and a little more open-minded, but also
Open
like
minded.
trying to figure
I like
out
that.
what makes the other people in our industry tick as well. Because then when you talk to them and be like, what were you thinking when you made this thing? Either it's totally spot on or they're like, nah, man, like I was just jiving and listening to AC/DC and this is how it came out. And so that to me is ultimately very fascinating.
I like it. I like it. And by the way, Benjamin, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it. So this actually brings up a good question because I know a lot of people, of course, like in the last, I don't know, what has it been? Maybe 6 months to a year, probably the last year, the whole buff turkey has come about. It's like all the new like rave right in the whiskey world from all like us fellow whiskey enthusiasts and so forth. Do you feel like the buff turkey stuff, there's so much of it out there that it's going to be around for a long time? Or do you feel like it's, all those barrels for the most part, regardless if they're acquired by Jay West or other individuals as well, are they kind of like at the end of the road for like the buff turkey allotment? Like I know people would love to kind of know like the background of like what's really out there from the whole buff turkey, initial blast, if you will.
Sure, yeah. In regards to that Frankfurt distill lots that a lot of people have, and I certainly have quite a bit of it myself, it's really hard because even when you know, you don't actually know, right? And
Yeah,
so I I have no reason to believe that I bought it all. I know that
yeah,
I bought a ton of it, which is a huge privilege, but also it's a fascinating trend to me, right? Because the reason I bought it was I like I knew who produced it. It was had incredible age with an incredible tannin profile and something that's what I
yeah.
talk about. And I think we even talked about this in your tasting. Like I care about tannin more than I care about anything else. And to find really old Kentucky whiskey that still had a really soft tannin profile that meant it could age for years and years and years was super attractive to me. And like, that's by no means the oldest stuff I've bought. Like I've 20-year
Yeah.
Kentucky in inventory.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
I'm less focused on like how much of it is out there. And also, like, if I asked, no one could give me that answer anyways. And so I'm kind of giving you
Yeah.
the consultant answer, which is like, it depends.
Depends.
But I really don't have any good insight. I know I bought a lot of
Okay.
it. I love it. I love it for what it is, right? And then like a year later, folks were like, hey, have you heard of this stuff? And I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Knowing that I had a ton of it and had a purpose for it and stuff. But um, it's just kind of a fascinating phenomenon because it also highlights that like generally a lot of people just don't care what's available, and then every now and then everyone gets really, really interested in what's
Really
available for
into
a
it.
short
I
period of
mean,
time, and then
so true.
we go back to doing what we do, which is buying whiskey from producers and through
Yep.
brokers and all that kind of stuff. So to me it's super fascinating, but the long and the short of it is that I have no idea how much is out there. I wish I had
Okay.
more of it, as does pretty
Yeah.
much everybody. But when it's good, it's great. I buy it no matter how expensive it is. And
I hear that.
sometimes it ends up in blends or sometimes it ends
Yeah.
up in single barrels.
I hear that. I hear that, Jay. I love it. That's a great overview as well. I love that. So Roman actually has a really good question here, Jay. So he says, have you ever done a blend where it was a group blend by which they had a suggestion of like kind of like what you should maybe use toward like like a future release? I assume is what he's meaning by that. I'm not sure if they're obviously we did a single barrel, but I know sometimes maybe like other groups have done like a lot of different picks with you. They may have had like different suggestions. Have any of those kind of ever kind of crossed your mind where you're like, maybe I should put that into a like create a separate batch, if you will?
Sure. Yeah, it's great question, by the way. Very interesting question, and certainly not one I've gotten before. But historically, I've blended completely in solitude, which is both. It sounds moody and cool, but really is just a function of Middleburg being in the middle of nowhere, and it
Yeah.
usually being like me and the Ravens, and then my production guy Peter. So, um, that said, I am toying with ways to bring people into the blends in 2026. I
Yeah.
find that a lot of groups will try two barrels and be like, hey, can we blend these? And I'm like, sure. Are you ready to buy two barrels? And then they go, actually, we like it as a single barrel. And that's where the blending conversation ends. And so, but I have had multiple people, approach me and be like, hey, are you going to do like a blend sort of program?
Yeah.
And the answer for that is also probably like a creativity within confines. You
Okay.
guys all heard it first. There'll be an opportunity to become a member of the Reveries in 2026, and so I'm kind of
Ooh.
figuring out, maybe we do like a group activity day, right? Which is like sit down and help me refine Raven or learn about how we
Yeah.
start a Raven batch or something. But that's a lot of words to say that I haven't, but I love getting as many people involved because I feel like we all enjoy whiskey more when you're more involved and understand how the industry ticks, right? And as people love watching you go select single barrels because it gives them like a new look and appreciation on access just to see how the industry works. And so it's
Mhm.
something I actively think about, pretty frequently.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. That sounds good. Wow, that would be fun. That would be a fun day to come on site, and regardless if it's like just like a one-off blend, just like that you end up putting out under the reveries or whatever, that would be really cool to kind of come on site. That's something to look forward to in 2026. I got that in the back of the brain. Got it in the back of the
For
brain.
sure.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, Tracy, thanks for. I think it's a great point. Not so much a question, but more like a point in terms of Jay and just like his I would say Jay is very much almost like an artist when it comes to whiskey and blending, and then just like really like you. I think a lot of times, at least in my experience, you meet a lot of people in the whiskey world that definitely enjoy whiskey, but there's a lot of people that like truly like fall in love with whiskey, right? And fall in love like really like they love every aspect of it and like what they bring to the table. So I think kudos to Jay for that. Completely agree. Completely agree. Um, so Jay, you talked a little bit earlier about like the whiskey that you bring in. Talk to people about like when you're trying to find barrels. Number one, first question: is it easy? Like when like you just to try to find whiskey in general, right? Bourbon, rye, American whiskey. Is it easy to find whiskey at this day and age, or is it really challenging from your perspective?
I think that buying barrels of whiskey is not unlike going to the store, right?
Yeah,
I don't know how long you've been doing Bourbon Judge, and I should know, and I apologize. But
yeah, yeah.
presumably when you started, there was a lot less whiskey on the shelf, whether that was 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10
Mm-hmm.
years,
Yep,
Um,
so true.
I'd say that it's not inaccurate to say that buying barrels is similar to that, right? There's
Yeah,
simply more whiskey available now. And that's not a commentary on the health of the market. It's not the
yeah,
commentary of the health of the distillers, but thankfully there's more whiskey than I've ever had the opportunity to purchase now.
yeah,
That said, a lot of it doesn't fit what I'm trying to do. And so I think
yeah.
it's easier to have access to it, but it's
Okay.
harder to find the whiskeys that I want because,
Ah,
we have tons of space, but I have limited warehouses and limited dollars. And so
correct.
everything that I purchase, I want to either have because it was so irresistible, I needed to
Yeah,
own it and to figure out how to release it later, or
yeah,
it needs to fit into something that I'm considering releasing to the market. And so that means that I taste a lot of stuff. I turn down a ton of stuff. I'm constantly, being like, well, this is interesting and a good price, but
yeah.
actually it doesn't fit for this thing. So I have to be responsible. But then the other half the time, I'm like, I am done buying whiskey. And then 2 weeks later, I'm like, hey, accountant, we need to wire someone. We found something really cool. And they're like, no, not again, not again. And so I kind of speak out of both sides of my mouth, right? And that there's a lot of access, but there's also never been more whiskey to sort through. And so I spend a lot of time going, no, 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 yes, 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 no, 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 yes, yes, yes. And
Yes, it
so
does. I
that
like
to
it. I
me
like it.
means that the industry is actually really healthy, right? Because it's not that there's bad whiskey, but there's different whiskeys, and everyone now has the opportunity to find the right whiskey for what they're doing, and
Yep.
that has made it, it's created a lot of opportunity for what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, Mike, we had a blast. Mike was there, West Virginia. Mike Petraka. He was there at
Yeah,
our pick 2 weeks ago. Yeah, we had a blast, Mike. That was a fun time. So if we do it again 2026, we'll bring Tracy with us, Mike, next time. We'll bring Tracy with us for sure. All right, so it sounds like there is a lot of whiskey out there, but you're definitely very particular about like the whiskey you want to bring in, great quality, and so forth. Do you find yourself, Jay, like, and again, because I'm definitely not an expert when it comes to blending, right? Not at all. I'm on the opposite side. But is it better to only end up like buying whiskey from like five, six, like a set number of distilleries, and that's like your go-to? Or are you kind of open, like when you do reach out to your accountant, to use your example, you're like, hey, I found like this really rare whiskey from X, Y, and Z distillery, right? Not one of the ones you maybe
sure.
that you worked with in the past, but you're doing it for the first time. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have a lot of criteria, but some of my favorite are that, it's a pleasure and a privilege to call the amount of travel that I do. is
Ah,
work, right? Like it's something I do. And so, everything we purchase is from someone I've visited. I've seen their production facility. I've seen how they do things. I trust how they produce. Because usually what people ask me, right, is when are you going
mhm.
to start distilling? And I go,
Yeah,
hopefully not anytime soon, because if I need to
yeah,
start distilling, we have other problems. My background is varied and diverse and interesting and very tuned for what I do, but I don't have biochem experience. I would not be a good distiller. And so I put
okay,
the trust and care into the hands of people who are distilling, and they've been distilling longer than I've been around, or longer than I've been into whiskey, or longer than I've been buying
yeah,
whiskey. But I visited them, I know
sure,
them, I personally seen what they do, and I trust that these are the best whiskey makers in America. And so I'm going to buy whiskey from those people. And whether it's that weird lot of barrels that's only 6 barrels deep, in the back of my
yeah,
warehouse, I visited there, and I've gained access to purchase those things through being a good customer and a friend of the brand, and kind of just coming to know them over time. And then some of my bigger lots of whiskey, right? They're made by people I look up to and trust more than, if someone's like, "Hey Jay, go run this still," I would screw
yeah,
it up for sure. And so the last thing I want to do is be anywhere near that control panel, unless I'm standing there with the guy who's like, "Hey, this is what this is doing, and this is how much
yeah,
enzyme we're adding," and stuff like that. And so,
for
I
sure,
try
for
and
sure.
take a pretty nuanced position in that I'm purchasing from people that I also deeply trust,
Yeah,
because I want my consumers to trust what I'm putting together. I couldn't put
absolutely,
together what I'm putting together if I wasn't taking whiskey from people that I super duper trust and like verify
sure,
through taste.
sure.
It tastes amazing.
Yeah,
Makes sense to me.
that's a good thing, and I like the fact that you said that you know these people, you visited their distilleries, you respect like their whiskey making production and so forth. So I think that says a lot, because that to me says that you're not just buying any random barrels of whiskey that's out there because it's at a decent price. You're truly focusing on like the quality of the whiskey because you know who made it, the brand those brands stand for, and those individuals. So that like everything kind of boils down to like the relationships, and who those individuals are. So that probably says the reason why I think a lot of your blends are also really good, because you're obviously getting really good whiskey as well, which is awesome. So kudos to you.
I
Definitely
appreciate that.
kudos to you. Yeah, of course, of course. So it looks like I think Jason wants to know whether or not if you have any more 17-year-old barrels of whiskey floating around. That's a good one.
I I have one or two. I try and be really thoughtful about how I do that stuff, right? And so like some of you may or may not be part of the dining series called Breaking Dread out here in DC. And so I found a couple of those hazmat barrels, and they're so short that they're problematic, right? Like if anyone knew that that was coming more
Yeah,
than a minute before it launched, people would have been camping out, and they would have been monsters and goblins and bots and all that kind of stuff. And so, the dining experience was one way for me to be like, we are going to take this whiskey and we're going to have a mutual experience and hopefully gain an appreciation for it, so that you don't go immediately send this to unicorn auctions, right? And so,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
So
I
true.
have a
No one wants
couple.
that.
My goal really is to release them as mindfully as possible, or I've considered doing some charity elements and stuff, but
Hmm,
um,
that'll be really
I
cool.
wouldn't expect to see many of them, but I would say that I still, I always grin a little bit because I have some cool stuff coming.
Very nice, very nice. So this is actually an interesting question, and again, everyone's different. So I truly have no clue. This is a great question, Tracy. But Tracy, I guess, wants to know whether or not do you think, and maybe this is something that I'm not sure if Reveries or Provenance would ever look at, but Scotch, is that ever something that you think would come into your
Yeah.
realm, if you will?
I love Scotch, right? Like the American market for Scotch is very different than bourbons.
Sure.
But one thing a lot of people don't know about me is that before I was buying whiskey by the barrel, I was buying Armagnac and cognac and rum and stuff. So I have an
Oh,
appreciation of international spirits before I had an appreciation for buying full barrels of kind of domestic spirits. And so I never say never. I don't have any Scotch in my inventory. I have just about
okay,
everything else under the sun. But
okay.
in the coming months and years, it would be really cool. And like I've just launched a partnership with the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, right? Which is kind of what I do for American whiskey,
Hmm.
for Scotch whiskey. And so
Yeah.
um, who knows what's to say I might find in their inventory that doesn't fit what they're doing, and maybe they're trying to find a new home for it, or working with those distilleries. But I'd say that's firmly in the wait and see, and maybe we'll keep you along for the ride, because it could definitely happen. Although I don't have any right now, so don't
Okay.
hold out for
Okay.
it, but keep an eye.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. So your history was like a whole bunch of other spirits. You said rum, cognac, armagnac, and so forth. I did not know that, Jay. Interesting.
Totally. And so, folks are like, "Oh, you ever going to get into that Armagnac thing?" And that's kind of when I enjoy a good chuckle, because to me it's like I never left. And so the future for Reveries, people are like, "How could the Reveries get stranger?" And I tell people like provenance is continuing to grow like this way, right? Like it's going to grow in scale and access nationally. And
Yeah.
the reveries is going to continue to get stranger and stranger and stranger. Like the new artworks and the new kind of the new lore for the brands and some of the new releases I'm doing all are getting weirder and more wild and avant-garde and innovative. And some of that means I'm pulling in some of that stock, whether it's rum or cognac, or it's barrels from my
Nice.
Calvados and cognac releases that are going to house some of these whiskeys. But I try and keep
Oh,
everything very, very tightly woven, and so everyone
I
kind
get
of
it.
knows what's going on.
Sure.
But yeah, all those relationships come from years more of doing that kind of stuff, which is really fun to bring into the world of whiskey as well.
Very nice. I did not know that. It's funny you say that. They always say every day you learn something new. I did not know you had a history with other spirits. I thought you were a bourbon, rye, American whiskey guy only. I had no clue that you had a ton of experience before with like other spirits like rum and cognac and armiac. I had no clue, Jay. Look at all these hidden
Totally.
talents. Love it.
Yeah,
Love it.
we're looking to take the first kind of group trip over to like Scotland next year, right? Take a couple of people and go see Scottish whiskey making and see how it's different and stuff. So, if that goes well,
Nice.
hopefully take some folks to France in the future years and learn just how,
Yeah.
everyone appreciates great spirits, but everyone has their own way of making them. And that to me, I think is just super cool.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What's going on, Carrie? Good to see you, my friend. So speaking of other spirits, and maybe this is me, but obviously you have a ton of experience with other spirits. Now knowing that the Reveries has a ton of like just flexibility for the future, which of those other spirits do you think blend very well with like a finished whiskey, such
Mm.
as armiac, cognac, rum, etc.? Like, which ones do you think pair better with certain spirits, and then or like bourbon or rye, and the reasons why? I would love to know from your experience. More like the
That's
reasons why as well.
that's a great question. So we'll kind of go back to the blending floor a little bit. So,
Okay.
one of the things, so the human brain loves sugar, it loves acid, and it loves tannin. And obviously, bourbon whiskey is good at delivering a sweet profile, but not a lot of sugar and tons of
Correct.
tannin, heavy tannin,
Correct.
just relentless tannin. And so, you know,
Right.
tickling the other parts of the brain, it's why people love cocktails, right? Like cocktails
Mm-hmm.
typically have a citrus, a sugar, and a spirit.
Yep.
And so, like, what I love is like Calvados is a great vehicle for bright acidity, right? Like, it's got those
Yep.
fruit flavors, but it has tons of
Mm-hmm.
acid in it. Armagnac
Mm-hmm.
is very similar, but it's a darker kind of profile.
Sure.
Cognac has some of those tropical fruits and sometimes figgy sort of things, and rum can be all over the place. But
Yeah.
what I really like is also things like fortified wines. Like you have your sherries, like PX and Oloroso, which is like sweet
Okay.
and dry. You have your ports, but
Mm-hmm.
also things like Champenois and
Yeah.
Ratafia, or Ratafia, however you pronounce it.
Mm-hmm.
But my goal really is that so Raven will always be straight bourbon and whiskey that'll be unfinished. And a lot of people ask me if the Reveries is going to have like a finished barrel program. And what I tell folks is like
Mm-hmm.
my goal is not, Starlight does an incredible job. They have one of the best finishing programs in the entire country. And so that's why I
So
buy a
true.
lot of Starlight every year. My
Yeah.
goal
Yeah.
is not to recreate that. It's not to do what they're doing because I couldn't
Yeah.
do it better than what they're doing.
Sure.
My goal
Sure.
is to create finished components that are the building blocks for new blends. And so next year there'll be new
Ah.
releases that are, I think it's easy to overdo finishes, but it turns out
Yeah.
10% Calvados finished bourbon and 2% Amburana finished this and 2% Ratafia finished this
Mm-hmm.
mix well with 80% straight bourbon to create these brand new profiles that kind of tickle all three of those receptors, whether it's the tannin or the sugar or the acid that people
Yeah.
absolutely love and really clicks with them without being just sweet candy whiskey, right? Or like
Sure.
super bitter,
Sure.
nasty, oaky whiskey. And so the future
Correct.
for me is taking those things, right, and pairing like a cognac and a sherry actually work really nicely because there's so much tannin, but then there's residual sugar. I love pairing things like Rotafia and
Yeah.
Calvados because it's super bright, but also there's a little more residual sugar, but it has like this beautiful kind of figgy backbone and brioche and all that kind of stuff. And so,
Mm-hmm.
you know, red wine is great about dumping in even more tannin if you have a whiskey that's not as tannic as maybe you'd like. And so, trying to pick out those pairings to me has been really fascinating and also sets the stage for I think what is going to be a really, really exciting 2026.
That sounds pretty damn good. And if you ever need someone to come down to Middleburg, it's only a 3 hour drive. It's a straight
You know where to
shot.
find me.
I know where to, if you ever need a guy, I know a guy, Jay. I'm here to help. I love that, man. That's taking blending, like truly creating. That's not even blending. That's like creating concepts, right? Like whiskey concepts. It's different than just like a standard, to your point, right? Which is what I agree with you. I love Andrew and the whole team down there at Star. Like they do a phenomenal job of like finished whiskeys. But I love what you're talking about, which is like truly creating like a brand new concept of different finishes, like 2% this, 8% this, 10% here, and putting it all together. I don't think anyone's doing that on the market, at least not anyone that I know of. I mean, people will do like a cigar finish, which is always very
Right.
traditional, right? The Armagnac and the sherry, blah blah blah. But no one's really doing like exactly what you mentioned, which is pretty cool. So I love the future experiments. That's a good thing. That's definitely a good thing.
Thank you. Yeah,
Um,
my goal is to, I want to be different, but not for the sake of being different. I want folks to have access to whiskeys that hopefully don't compare to things that they can get. Because honestly, like, people have been doing this way longer than I have, and so like
yeah,
Angel's Envy can finish a bourbon like few people can ever do because they have all that experience, right? But I think that this is where my weird skill set of these
mhm,
own Carmagnac, cognacs and armagnacs and rums and how they interface with all these things comes together perfectly in a story that actually fits, the Reveries lore as well.
yeah. No, no, I love that. I love that. So Carrie's asking this question. Well, I know what Carrie left out though is the fact that Carrie is a big cigar smoker, so he loves a bourbon or a rye finished in like previously red wine cask.
Sure.
Are there any particular, I guess you would say, types of red wine cask that you think are better? And for red wine cask specifically, does it pair better with like bourbon or rye? I know what he's thinking because
Certainly.
him and we think alike.
It's funny too because I'm in like that 3 week window a year where I can tolerate smoking cigars. So like it totally changes my perspective on taste for like the 3 weeks that I'm comfortable smoking a cigar because it's neither too hot nor cold. But
So
I love
true.
red wine finishes, man. Red wine is such a big envelope, right? Whether you're into Tempranillo or Sangiovese, or whether you're into
Yeah.
New World cabs and stuff. But I spent a week in Napa this year learning a lot from winemakers out there, and also
Okay.
we have a partnership with RDV Lost Mountain, which I think is one of the coolest and most prestigious wine producers here in Virginia, but they're making red wines in a very old world style rather than
Mm.
making big, musky, powerful, juicy, jammy reds. And so I happen to think that their Cabernet pairs extremely well with our whiskey,
Oh
which I'm
wow.
really excited about.
Okay.
I have 36 French oak casks from RDV. I send them some whiskey barrels, they send me some wine barrels. We have a partnership and, spend some time and stuff together. And so
Oh.
that's the experimental part of the Reveries, but you
Okay.
guys tasted one when you were on the barrel pick, whether you,
We
whether you
did.
remember it or not, because we tasted a lot of whiskey that
Oh,
day.
I
But
remember it. I was at the time I was like, how can we get two barrels? If we can get this, if I can convince Jay to give me this French oak, but I know you said that was not allowed for release at that point, which is okay. Which is okay.
yeah, it's cruel, but I do love to taste people on stuff that is firmly not for sale. But
Yeah.
red wine finishes, I think, are some of the hardest finishes because red wine has so much of its own tannin, right? So if you're stacking
Yeah.
tannins, you get a really kind of difficult
Mm-hmm.
composition there. But
Mm-hmm.
when they work really beautifully, man. And also, red wine can bring tons of acid as well. And acid,
Yeah.
acid is what bourbon is usually missing. And so
So true.
bringing those two together can be super beneficial to one another. And also, like, I typically like Spanish reds or more like old world
Ah,
style reds and things that are juicy and acidic like Beaujolais that are maybe a little bit different than like a California cab. But those
sure.
things for me pair the best with bourbons because there's so much implicit kind of sweetness from the corn and they
Got it.
have a little less tannin. So lots of opportunity though. Lots of opportunity.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. And then Jay, and maybe you could just help me a little bit, maybe from the wine standpoint, because I remember kind of, so my journey the last, like with the whole whiskey tube thing to your question earlier, about 5.5, almost 6 years now. Before that, I was really into wines. My father-in-law had a huge wine collection. And all the time he loved like a Syrah, a Petite Syrah, and so
Mm.
forth. But it's funny because as much as we drank wine many years ago before I converted full time over to bourbon, I never see any like Syrah finished like whiskeys, bourbon, rye, etc. No matter what it is. Why is that? Out of curiosity.
Yeah, Syrah is a really interesting grape, right? Because it's made to be a husky grape. It's big, it's dark. It has tons of like peppery characters.
Correct.
I have seen there have been a few, right? Like I believe that 48 did a Syrah or Shiraz, as you might hear, because Australian. I know that I'm blanking on the name. There's an Australian malt company that's down there. But what I would
Uh,
say is that America doesn't make a lot of Syrah, and so that's
mhm.
difficult. And then also, a lot of the Syrah elsewhere is just farther away, so the barrels are harder to get. And America has plentiful red wine varietals, so I think
Got it.
it's less to do with the profile and more that, if people are like, well, I'm going to buy barrels from across the ocean, like I want really prestigious barrels, or like,
Yeah.
maybe if it's already $500 to get that barrel from overseas, I'm going to spend $600 and get
Then
something named, right?
yeah.
Like a Rothschild or something that really carries some name along with the whiskey. But I would
Yeah.
love to see Petite Sirah, especially because Petite Sirah has so much character without being over tannic, and like a good,
Totally.
even like a Zinfandel, right? Like a Lodi Valley
Yeah.
Zinfandel, I think could bring a lot of characters. So
Hmm.
I think that Cabernet is popular because a lot of people know Cabernet, and so as you get to less
Hmm.
popular named wines,
Yeah.
folks don't understand them as well, and so they're less likely to just buy something on the shelf because it's like, oh, it's a Syrah finish, and I love Syrah.
Yeah.
But I'm
Yep.
hoping that's something we see develop in the next couple of years because I selfishly love Syrah myself.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, and it's a good point, and thank you for that explanation first and foremost. And you're right. I do recall. You're right. Foregate had one of their. I forget which one it was. It might have been like one of their Kelvin releases or one of the
I'm
other
blanking, and
batches.
I should know
It did.
this, but I
It
don't.
it did have a Syrah finish. You're right. And then looks like Domingo. Thank you for that, my friend. Looks like Bull Run had a
Bull
Syrah.
Run,
I did
yeah.
not know that. I did not know that. But you're right. They're very known for like their wine finishes. So that does make sense. It does make sense. Um, so Jay, I feel like I was talking about this topic at a whiskey event. This was a couple of weeks ago, right before your barrel pick, our barrel pick at your facility. Someone asked me, they're like, Judge, what do you think is the future of the whiskey industry, right? Do you think the big brands will continue to dominate rather? Do you think NDPs such as yourself and others will dominate? And then also, what happens to like craft distilleries? Are they going to become like the next, I guess, big thing in terms of either their own whiskey that they're putting out under their own brands, and or the whiskey that they're sometimes maybe even providing to like yourself and other NDPs? Where do you see all of those kind of different groups kind of playing in the future?
Oh man.
That's a
Well,
loaded
I wish I
question.
had
I
a
know.
crystal
I,
ball.
I hit you with the loaded
No,
one.
I was like, where is my 8 ball? Where did I put that thing?
It's right there.
What I would say is, and it's kind of clear from what I do, right? Like, I think the future of the whiskey industry, a lot of people panic because they say that people aren't drinking anymore. And I think that that is an absolute lie because people are drinking everywhere I look. But
They are.
people care more about what they're drinking, right? Like we see this
Hmm.
all the time. Like people are like, well, now that I'm into whiskey, I don't need to buy every whiskey. I want to buy less good whiskeys. I want to buy
Yeah.
less in volume,
Yeah.
higher quality. And so,
Yep.
along with that, though, people are also demanding more information about the whiskeys. They want to know who
Hmm.
made it, where it came from, what was the
Yeah.
process, why should I buy this whiskey when I could buy that whiskey, right? Especially
Correct.
if they're both made at the same place in Indiana, like what's the
Hmm.
difference? And so,
Yeah.
people are demanding that introspection, and they're curious, and I love that. And so my read on the future of whiskey is that people want to experience whiskey more. And that's why the motto for Provenance is that it's crafted for those who believe in the power of shared moments, right? Like whiskey tastes
Yeah.
good on its own, but it
Hmm.
tastes a whole nother level when you're sharing it with people and you're having a good time and you're clicking and bonding and having that experience. And so everything I'm doing at Middleburg supports that you should be able to get as close to the whiskey as humanly possible. And if you can't
Yeah.
physically get to me, I want to tell you everything about how I blended the Raven and
I
why
love
I
that.
make these barrels and why Provenance tastes the way it does. But also, you know, you know, Middleburg Barrel Company and Provenance Estate aren't really going to be open to the public because I also want to be able to have like you and I are having right now. Like, let's have a conversation. Let's have you stop in and have an experience. And a lot of people use the word experience to say you're going to spend a lot of money and get a little
Yeah.
time, and then we're going to get rid of you and get the next people that pay a lot of money. But
Sure.
experience to me is like when you and I travel the country and we go to distillers and we talk to them and we learn about their whiskey and we select a barrel and we release it to our audiences. I
Yeah.
want folks to be able to get as close to the whiskey as they can and have an experience around it and leave being like, I understand what the reveries are about. I understand why Provenance is the way it is. And therefore, when it's time for me to buy more whiskey, I'm going to look at these brands because I understand them and
Hmm.
I believe in them and I've experienced them in a really genuine way. And so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the future brands is that heritage guys are going to continue to make insanely good whiskey at great
Agree.
prices.
Agreed.
Craft people will continue to innovate in their own ways, right? Like Bull Run
Hmm.
has their angle, Starlight has their angle. There's
Correct.
so much room for everyone to have their own idea. And so my
Yeah.
my whole goal with Provenance and the Reveries is to be what is my angle, but it has to make sense, and most importantly, it has to be genuine. So that way folks are like,
Yeah.
well, that's his shtick, but it's not just
Yeah.
his shtick. It's like Jay's DNA is figuratively, not literally, all over
Sure.
this
Yeah.
whiskey.
Yeah.
And we know why he does things the way he does, and like we love
Hmm.
the way they taste, and so we click with them. And so that's
Yeah.
short of having a crystal ball and knowing how it actually goes, the way I
Yeah.
want to build whiskeys is that folks can be as close to them as they can possibly be. And my goal for whiskey groups too is that 50% of the calendar is for new people to always have room to come and visit, and
I love
50% for
that.
people who visited before to come on back and continue their experience and pick up where they left off. And so
Yeah.
whether it works or not, we will see, but we will have an amazing time doing it. And until the crystal ball gets a little closer to my grasp, that's how I'm going to roll with it.
I love it. I love it. No. Thanks for that explanation. You hit the nail on the head. And I do think that it's nice that the respective separate groups, right? No matter if it's the legacy distilleries or the crafts and so forth, they each kind of have like their own lane. One thing you hit the nail on the head on earlier. I do think that the average whiskey consumer is definitely more in touch with like what they like, what they dislike, and so forth. So when they find something that's really, really good, such as like the Reveries or Provenance and so forth, they tend to kind of stick with like certain releases of certain brands because they're like, I know what the Raven stands for. I know what Provenance stands for. And I think that's actually a good thing in a lot of ways. I really do. I think that's definitely a good thing for sure. Definitely. And JP, good to see you, my friend. Always good to see you, Ash Sifter, aka JP. Good to see you, my friend. There's a comment here, and I'm not a wine expert, so I'll see if Chris Sammons, if he agrees or disagrees with this comment about wine. Is that a true statement? Okay. All right,
I
let's
love it,
get
man.
this.
I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and so now that I'm of drinking age, love to go back and enjoy all the Willamette Valley has to share.
Ah, very nice, very nice. That's awesome. That is awesome. Chris was on our pick also down in he was the very funny guy. Chris Sammons was the funny one. He was the comedian out of Ohio. That's Chris Sammons,
I
by the
like how
way.
you almost did air quotes for a second. You're like the funny guy. And I was like, no, you can't get some good cracks, man. Gotta give him
Chris is
credit.
he's a good time. He is a good time for sure. He's a good time. All right, Jay. So it's a couple questions left. I know I only got you for like 15 more minutes. I want to be respectful. I know you have a
Sure, man.
very early morning, so I was going to try to be mindful of that. When you think of the Reveries, when you think of Provenance, and more important, when you think of Jay West 2026, what's like one or two things that's like uber critical for you, like your focus that you want to make sure you accomplish in 2026 as it relates like to your whiskey brands?
Sure. That's a scary question, but it's a good one. My goal is that I want to reach more people. And I think I mentioned this
Yeah.
before in other interviews, but my goal is also that no one ever talks about provenance and the reveries in the past tense, right? My goal is not to grow so quickly that people are like, hey man, you remember when the reveries was cool? Like, hey man, you remember when Jay West was doing cool stuff? Like, hey man, remember when Provenance's new releases really excited me? And so I think about that every goddamn day. And so my 2026 has to be structured around that as well, right? I want to release new whiskeys, right? There's whiskeys like the Deep and Murder of Crows that are coming out. There's Provenance's new limited edition is going to drop, in the spring or summer. And so I
Okay.
think about those things, like how do we push the envelope? How do we release new whiskeys that are exciting, that, are as good or better than the previous releases? Because there's also now this pressure, right? We've put out some whiskeys and people have enjoyed them. And so now we have to live up to that. And so,
Mm-hmm.
um, you will see crazier stuff and you'll see wilder stuff out of the reveries as it moves towards blends, right? Like groups will actually be able to pick part of a blend of Raven, and that's the
Okay.
Murder of Crows. And Provenance is going to have
Ooh.
new SKUs, both one that's less expensive and also some that are more expensive. And so um, it's kind of a loaded question because for
Yeah.
me, my goal is to cement myself as the guy who makes whiskey for people. And whether you make 40 grand a year and you just want an amazing $40 whiskey, I'm going to
Yep.
try and scratch that itch. But also if you're like, I have the 40 other reveries that he released last year and I still
Mm-hmm.
want something cool and different, my
Yeah.
goal is to deliver that, but it has to be genuine, right? Like my goal
Yeah.
is not to, I still love Ambrana, right? Like Ambrana was a
Yeah.
huge phase for the industry. And my
Big
belief
time.
is that 2% Ambrana is like the flaky salt of the whiskey world. And so
Yes.
my goal
Yeah.
is to not chase fads or chase things that are hot in the minute and kind of I always say I'd rather be right than fast. I'm always kind of slowly in the background, plodding along and feeding
Yeah.
pistachios to my ravens
Yep.
and sitting in
Yep.
the country and trying to figure out what will keep people interested in the long term. And so
Yep.
2026 for me is an opportunity to take what I've learned in 25. And now that I live here full time and really
Yeah.
have things figured out from a production sense and a labeling sense, how to
Hmm.
make some really, really compelling whiskeys that hopefully get
Yeah.
people even more excited than they are today.
I love that, Jay. I love that. And Mike, you hit the nail on the head. Jay does make some damn good whiskey. He really does. And
I appreciate that.
yeah, but honestly, I mean, and that's the one thing that you said in the beginning is that you think about that every damn day, and so do I, right? Because I want to make sure brands that I love. There have been a lot that have like faded away and so forth, but I love the fact that you are so uber focused on quality versus quantity. You want to be able to touch like the consumers, like you said, the $40 consumer, because he or she can only afford a $40 bottle, which is totally cool, versus like maybe like a more limited release, like a 14-year-old Provenance, and that's cool too. But the best part of that is that you want to have quality along the way without having too much quantity just kind of hitting the market, to avoid that in 2027 people saying, hey, what happened to the Reveries, or what happened to Provenance, and what happened to Jay West. Like, I love that you're focusing on quality. I think just keep doing that and you will definitely be around for a long time. I think that is extremely important for sure. Big time.
I appreciate
Big
that.
time.
Yeah, the whiskey world's not getting rid of me, and so
Good.
hopefully, I'm here about this time next year, and we're having another great conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I know it looks like my buddy CJP, aka Corey, looks like he met you at the Old Line event, which is pretty cool. Which is awesome. So you blew your mind, or you blew his mind rather. I love that. It's pretty funny. I love that. That is pretty cool. Some Oregon people. That's a good thing. That is a good thing. So it sounds like, Jay, you are open to like going to like a lot of different whiskey events. You are obviously very much, even though you're now in DC, which is great, and then obviously drive over to Middleburg for like everyday purposes, but you're out on the road a lot also, still traveling to events, conferences, whiskey conferences, and so forth. It seems like that's a good thing, for you.
Yeah, a lot of people were like, "Well, now that you have the Reveries, you need to stop traveling." And I was like, "Why would I do that?" You know, within reason, right? Like
Yeah.
I spent almost 16 weeks of last year in DC, and so now that I live here, both my wife and I were pleased that I now have 4 more months at home. But
Yes.
a
Yes.
lot of people also ask if I'm going to stop doing the single barrel program I do, and my answer is like, all of the relationships I have buying barrels have come from the single barrel program. And so for me, like continuing to find the best, the people who are the best at what they do is what the single barrel program is for, and releasing crazy cool whiskeys from every corner of the U.S. And the world is something I'm going to continue. And so my goal really every year is to see as many people who buy whiskeys I release as possible, whether you're in New Orleans or Oregon or Seattle
Yeah.
or California, or even Ohio and Iowa and stuff like that. And so, next year I'll be on the road just as much as I was this year, because I want to see more people and see more brands. And it was fun. We did the old line event, 21090, did Rock the Rick House, which was a
Yeah.
huge blast. We did you came and saw me. We threw a festival at Middleburg, and that's going to be happening
That
again
was
on August
oh
1st to 26th. So if you missed it
nice
last year, had a good time, definitely come on back. We'll
for
we'll
sure.
have fun food, Ferraris and tater tots, and all the stuff in between. But my goal is also that I'll be on the road and doing more things like with the whiskey washbacks and of the world and stuff, because I love getting out, and like I got into this because I love talking to people about whiskey. And so if I have an
That's
opportunity to
awesome.
go out on the road and talk to people about whiskey, I'm surely going to take it.
That's awesome. I love that. That is awesome. That's pretty cool. And good to hear that the your event's gonna be back on in August of 2026, because that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. So I mean,
Now that
Ferrari's,
we know
tater
the
tots,
AC works, we are good
yes,
to go.
yes, and the AC works. That's even better. That is even better. Even better. So speaking of whiskey events and maybe being on the road, so I watched it last night. I'm sure everyone probably in the chat. You guys can drop a comment if you guys watched it as well. I was literally on the couch last night in tears laughing at Jim Gaffigan, the comedian's his whole whiskey thing, or
Yeah, the
show.
bourbon set. Yeah.
Yes, the bourbon set. So I think I saw in the credits at the end, because I watched all the pictures at the end, and I saw you in the background. Jay West is kind of on the side there.
Yeah.
So you had a chance to meet him, it sounds like.
I think I'm still hungover from hanging out with Jim at the green room afterwards. My colleague Craig Lehman and I hung out with him for several hours, right? To the point where I was like, we should all go to bed. Like we are past the good decisions part of the night. But like Jim's having a good time, I'm having a good time, Craig's having a good time. Like there's a couple other folks from the, prolific I'm blanking on his name, and it's because I don't have the card in front of me, but we had a great time. The set was good. I literally, people were like, "You're in Louisville?" And I was like, "I am only in Louisville for this evening." And sure
Mm,
enough, like we flew in, caught the set, hung out with Jim afterwards for a while. Jim, super fun guy and a friend of the brand and the store and
yeah,
all that kind of stuff. So it,
yeah.
it was a huge opportunity. But I also didn't realize I left and I was like, man, I didn't get a single picture with Jim. And then someone was like, you made the credits. And I was like, oh,
You
there
made
is
the
a picture.
credits.
Like this is, and so, huge props to Jim, right? Who's a huge celebrity, but
Yeah.
is ultimately just a super cool guy with a really unique and humorous and down to earth perspective. And it turns out like he loves his whiskey too. Like we were drinking some wild stuff, and like we're talking
Yeah.
like hazmat binder's stash, right? Like it's not like he
Yeah.
travels around with a hip flask of like prohibition whiskey because he's a baller.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had a great time. It was super fun, and I literally, I'm very genuine when I say like I think I'm just recovering from that, and it was like 2 months ago because I am
Oh
not
my
a late night
gosh.
person, and we burn that candle at every end, man.
That's awesome. Good for you, man. Good for you. You know what I loved about that show is that you could tell that he truly knows whiskey, right? I mean, because like a lot of the things that like he mentioned, like
Very
one of the
specific,
funniest
yeah.
things, yeah, very specific, right? Very specific examples, things that he gave, and just it was just hilarious. I was just in tears, like, and I don't know if his story was like really true, but the whole Seinfeld story when he was like, you know what? Why don't you buy me a pour of that King in Kentucky? He's like, you know what? He's like, Jerry was like, why don't you have another one? He was like, sure, why not?
I think my favorite part was because of what you and I do, right? Like there is a persona around people who are like too into whiskey. And it's like very in the beginning, right? Where
Oh yeah,
he's like, I'm gonna talk to you about whiskey for 30 minutes, which is super annoying. Or like
yep.
as bourbon people go, do several times a day. And I was like, darn if that isn't true. Like I'm always running into people and talking about bourbon for 30 minutes. And hopefully they're not like, wow, I ran into that annoying guy in Georgetown again. Like, Jesus, like uh, the whole set was great. Like it was a good time. It was funny.
That was awesome. That was awesome. That was cool. It was cool. So cool to see you at the end. And I was like, because I stayed on. My wife's like, "Are you done yet?" I'm like, "I'm almost done." I'm looking at the credits. She's like, "You're not going to know anyone other than like Jim Gaffigan and other stars." I'm like, "Wait a second, that's Jay West right there." I was like, "I know a star."
And that's how I knew that I peaked, right? Like I didn't even have to reach to the heights of Jim Gaffigan. I just was in the credits of a Jim Gaffigan thing, and that to me,
That's
that made my
epic.
2025. Yeah.
That is epic. That is epic. So Jay, we got you for a couple minutes left. So we were down, and thank you again for your hospitality. Myself and Mike and Chris Sammons and
It
a whole
was an
bunch of other
honor.
folks had a chance. We got down. We picked a single barrel for our judge community, and honestly, which is a good and a bad thing. The good thing is that we picked a hell of a barrel, which everyone's going to be very happy, in a few weeks when we get it. But there were honestly a lot of. We could have probably walked away with like 3 or 4 of those barrels. You had a lot of really good barrels. It must be hard for you to kind of like, because you talked about this earlier, which I think is good. You're focusing more on quality than quantity, like just pushing out too many barrels at one point. But I would say it has to be hard because if I'm you, I mean, I wanted to walk away with like 2 or 3 of those barrels, but I know we walked away with one. And I'm very happy, but like you have some great whiskey in your inventory. It must be hard to just say, you know what, let's not put too much Reveries out there on the market. Let's just kind of take it, step by step. But I wanted 2 or 3 barrels that day. That was a tough day, really tough day.
I'm glad to hear it. Not that you said you wanted 2 to 3 barrels, which I'm thrilled about, but
Yeah,
you said it was a tough day, which to
it
me is great,
was.
right? Like we've all been on barrel picks, and you're like, I showed up, I didn't like these two, I like this
Yeah,
one, boom, done. And then I went to lunch.
yeah,
And I'm not. I want people to take this the right way. My favorite barrel pick to go on is Four Roses because it's the hardest. They roll out
ah,
10 amazing whiskeys. And if you don't
mhm,
jive with one of them, now you're left with 9 amazing whiskeys. And you can
yeah,
only pick one. And that to
yeah,
me, I'm not saying my whiskey is as good as Four Roses. So no one
yeah,
come
yeah,
at me for that. But
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
um there's always someone. But my real goal is that you leave that being like, I am so thrilled with that one thing I picked because there was so much incredible whiskey out that day. And so that's why I get there. I get there early in the morning. I pull all the barrels for each day based on who's coming
appreciate
and
that.
what I'm feeling and what I think is good. in the hopes that you will have the hardest selection, and you will leave being like, we picked one and I already can't wait to come back and I will do a
Indeed.
second because I had such a good time. The whiskey was so good and stuff like that. And so,
Yeah,
you guys picked a banger. I love seeing what people pick because I sometimes have ideas, but it's also like 6 in the morning, as I'm going through and tasting everything and stuff. And so it's really fun, and it kind of supports, like, it also like takes you guys on a journey, see which profiles you go for and all that stuff. But my
so
my
true.
goal ultimately is that you leave super thrilled and you're already like, this one hasn't even sold yet, but I can't wait to come back because this was
Yeah,
hard, but in a fun way, and we had a great time, and hopefully
for
we
sure.
achieved that.
We did. No, we really did. And yeah, Mike, I mean, I know it was your first time. You were there, I think, 2 weekends in a row, Mike. So you had a lot of Middleburg Barrel Company
The donkeys were
reveries.
like, we know this guy, we know this guy.
Yeah, literally. So no, but it was a great experience. It really was. I mean, so for everyone out there, we were down between three barrels, right? And I'll never forget this: number 1, 3, and 6, and like they were so unique and special, all three of them, but in different ways. So when we voted, it was definitely very close. One of them did win out, the one that we obviously picked, but in my mind, right, I said to myself, all three of these are like just fantastic barrels. So I personally didn't really care which one we landed because I loved all three of them almost equally. So I kind of let everyone else vote, and everyone voted for Chris Salmons was the final vote. I'm gonna call him out. Mr. Salmons was the final vote, and he was like, "Let's go with X," and that's the one we went with, and I was cool with it because fantastic whiskey. So it was easy. That was an easy one for sure. That was
I'm
an
so
easy
glad.
one. Indeed, indeed. Um, so I'm gonna let you go after this last question, Jay. One last question that came in with this is a good one because I think this is tough. I don't know if I can answer this myself, so I'm leaving it for you. So Jason Martinez wants to know, what is your perfect bourbon profile on the palate? Wow, mic drop there. And
That's a great
Jerron, I'm sorry, not
question.
Jason, Jerron.
I'm a huge fan of Knob Creek 12, man. I think it is 12 years old, $75, 100 proof. It is oaky, but not too oaky. It's fruity, it's not too fruity, right? Like we've seen some of those fruits in Knob Creek 21. We've seen some of the oak in the 15 and the 18. I think that 12 years is like, to me, is an extra age whiskey. Like a 12-year-old
Yeah.
whiskey is super developed. It should have all those things. And I find that in Knob Creek 12. So I'd say, like, anytime people are like, "Hey man, what's the whiskey you drink all the time? Like, what's your preferred profile and stuff?" Like, I point people towards Knob Creek 12 because if I could find a way to release a whiskey in the Reveries that is comparable to Knob Creek 12 at the price that you see
Oh,
Knob Creek 12, I'd be like,
yeah.
"I've done it, boys. We've done it all. We have cracked the code, and I have my crystal ball, and we are into the sunset." But and that day will
Love it.
never come for me because I don't make a bajillion barrels a year.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
Knob Creek 12 to me, I think is when I got into this in 2015, people were just like, "There's not enough whiskey on the shelf, and like, there's
Mhm.
not good values, and I hate this, and like, blah 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 blah." And now I'm like, "What's there to complain about? You have Knob Creek 12. It scratches every itch for
Literally.
me, and I can go to a city and buy a bottle and then leave it for the hotel staff when I have a couple
Yep.
pours and I can't take it with me,
Yep.
and that to me, it's it. So that's
That's it.
that's not the profile I try and achieve in all my whiskeys, but to me, if
Yeah.
you're just like, "Hey, are you feeling a bourbon?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, sure, Knob Creek 12, please," and it
Love
never,
it.
never, never disappoints.
That's so true. That's so true. That's a great point. You are spot on about that. I mean, gosh, I mean, I can't. I mean, like you said, did I can't repeat everything you said because you were so spot on. That is a bottle that I think dollar for dollar, one of the best whiskeys that's just available truly in every single market. It's consistent. The profile, and you're right. It's one of the ones where you can enjoy it. You buy it for $50, $55. You buy it, you enjoy half the bottle maybe, and you don't want to take it home, you can leave it for the staff. I mean, it is truly a fantastic bottle of whiskey. That was a hell of an answer. I like that, Jay. I like that.
Now, I will say, if someone at Beam is listening and wants to sell me like 100 barrels of 12-year-old Knob Creek, I will find a use for them. But until then, I will drink Knob Creek 12.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Oh man. Well, Jay, I want to be a man of my word. I want to keep it to this hour. You have a very early morning tomorrow, as do I. I just want to say two things. Number one, thank you for everyone who joined us tonight. Cheers to all of you in our community. We have such a special community. One of the things, I think was special about our community is honestly not even so much the whiskey, it's the people, it's the memories that you have, the connections that you make. So cheers to everyone out there in the community. And most important, cheers to our guest, the man who runs 50,000 different companies and has his hand in everything. But most importantly, he is making fantastic whiskey for you and me to enjoy in the future. So cheers to you, Jay West. Thank you so much for your time tonight, my friend. Really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. It's always an honor, and thank you guys for supporting Marcus because it means we can do cool stuff like this. So I'm here anytime you want me, and I'll be in the background making whiskey when I'm not.
Perfect. Cheers, Jay. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night, everyone.
Cheers, y'all.
See you guys. Bye-bye now.